I've always wanted to do that. And he said, well, why haven't you? And I said, well, I'm not allowed to. And he said, well, what do you mean you're not allowed to? And I said, well, there's a lot of things I'm not allowed to do. I said, I'm not allowed to have a microwave. And I'm not allowed to read. I'm not allowed. There was just a whole list of things. And so it just made me realise, as he'd asked me these questions and he'd sort of coax answers out of me, and he just sort of made me look at my life a lot differently. I didn't realise how controlled my life was.
Hi everybody, welcome to Soulmates and Suitcases. My name is Lisa Brarely, and beside me on the screen here is my husband and co-host Scott Brarely. We're excited to have our guest here today, but if you are new to Soulmates and Suitcases, our podcast is a place where we hold honest and open conversations about healing and growth, relationships and resilience, and of course, sharing all those amazing stories that shape us. And you can find all our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're very new now to this platform, TrueFans.fm. That's still not rolling off my tongue yet. But we're very excited to welcome our guest today. Welcome, Simone van Bree.
Hello and welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So today's interview and conversation is an audio only conversation, but we're very grateful that Simone has chosen to share her story with us today. So I'll let you know a little bit about Simone. She is the author of the book We Met on a Cruise. And we're going to kind of dive deep into what's inside this book and what's inside Simone's life. And we're hoping that a lot of her story and her reflections on life about reclaiming her own life and identity and discovering it's never too late for love will connect with our audience today. So welcome again, Simone. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll kind of dive into your story.
Okay, well, I guess I should start with my first marriage, which I'd been married for 28 years. I got married at 18 against my father's wishes, and he said I was far too young. I married into an Italian family, and my background was Dutch. So it was very much European, where the women did what they were told when they were told, and I tried to become a good Italian wife. However, from the day that we got married, I said to my husband, probably a week or two later, why aren't you nice to me anymore? And he said, because I don't need to anymore. And that made me think, right, so I was stuck. I couldn't go back home. Because my father didn't approve of me getting married. I couldn't very well turn around and say, now I don't want to be married. So I just muddled along and tried the best that I could. And this went on for a couple of years. And then I became a mother. And I learned over time that I just had to accept my lot in life. It wasn't a happy marriage. There were happy times in the marriage, but it totally revolved around my husband's life, his work, his business, and his sporting interests. And I just fitted in wherever I could. I didn't realise then what I do now is that it was coercive control. If I didn't do the right thing, I would be punished. Thankfully, I avoided physical harm, but I would have things like my car keys would be taken away from me, my jewellery, my bank books, everything that would give me an out was taken away, and then I wouldn't get spoken to for probably up to 3 weeks. But the home life went on as normal. We still had dinner every night. Sex had to go on, whether I liked it or not. And if there was people around, you wouldn't know that there was a problem. But anyway, that became my life, and I just learned to keep the peace and not say too much, not argue back, because I was always told I could leave any time, but not to take anything with me except the clothes on my back, because he would burn the house down, which he would have. And later, yes, like later on after I left, there was a lot of that did go on. But yeah, so I guess I lived my life in fear, and it just it just kept going that way. At 26, I had my second child, and our life went on like that pretty well until I was 46, and I finally got a job that I loved, and I was able to make a career out of it because the children were now 20 and 26. And I finally got respect from my husband because I got a company car as well as good pay. And we used the company car on weekends. And so that whole 12 months that I worked really hard and became very good at selling. And in the end, I won a cruise. And I had to take it in. I worked in heating and cooling, so we had seasons, and so in between the winter season and the summer season for the heating and the cooling, I had a 2 week window, and I was given the cruise, but nobody was able to come with me because it was short notice, and something like a 2 week cruise you need to have plans for. So I decided to go alone, and I didn't think I'd be allowed to because there was so many things I wasn't allowed to do, and one of them was I was never allowed to be away from the home. And when it actually finally came about and I was standing there on the deck, I could not believe the amount of freedom that I felt. I had never been happier in my life, and I didn't have to look after anybody except myself. And it was just the most wonderful experience. And I got a cabin with 3 other ladies that I didn't know, but I thought that's all part of the adventure. And it was so different. My life was so different, so different. And then I met David. David, is that okay if I keep going straight on to
Yeah,
this?
go for it.
100%. I'm just
Okay.
smiling because I can feel the energy from you about that experience.
Ah, well, um, on the third night of the cruise was the first formal night, and one of the ladies in my cabin sat on the same table at dinner with David. And I sat with 7 younger single ladies, which was a really good fun, but they wanted to leave early to go to have a party. And so I was sitting there at the table of 8 on my own, and I felt a little bit conspicuous. So I thought I'll walk over and let them know that I will catch up with them upstairs when we go into the showroom. But I just thought I'll go into the casino and wait. So I walked across the room and I was walking directly towards David. And he was sitting there facing me, and he was just watching me walk across the room. And I felt really self conscious. And by the time I got there, he stood up, and then Joan, that was sitting next to him, who was on my table, she realised who I was, and she said, "Come and meet everyone." And so I sort of became part of that table, and then we all went up to the showroom together. But I had stopped on the way to go to the ladies, and then when I got into the showroom, the lights were already a little bit down, and so I couldn't see them. So I thought I'll just sit here. I was sitting towards the back. And so and then I saw this man walking up and down the aisles. And well, because it was a formal night, he was in a tuxedo. And it wasn't until he came closer to where I was that I realised that it was David from the table. And I thought, oh, goodness me, how conspicuous does he look? And And then he got to me and he said, there you are. And he took my hand and said, we're all over here, and took me over to where they were all sitting. And I was really flushed and embarrassed, but it was also very comforting. His hand was so nice. It was, I don't know, it was just like holding my father's hand. It was just a really nice, warm hand. And so we sat together. And that night after the show, we all went and had drinks out on the back. There was a disco, and so we all sat there, and everyone sort of got to know each other. And then just over the next couple of days, I kept running into him, and he sort of became part of our group. But I didn't realise that when we stopped in Noumea, he was actually going to leave the ship because he was there for business, and he had a cabin on his own, and he wasn't really that comfortable, so he was going to leave. But then after he met all of us, I think he sort of decided to stay. And then that next morning again, I walked out to have a look at the back of the ship to see all these beautiful volcanic mountains, and virtually ran straight into him. And so it was just, he went off to do his meeting, and when he came back, we ended up running into each other again, and we just started sitting there having a conversation. And it was very comfortable, it was very easy, and he was very easy to talk to. And so this went on for the next couple of days, and then we were going, there was a shore trip, which he was going on to with a couple of the other ladies, but I wasn't, because I didn't want to be in a tender. And he'd left his key with our cabin attendant to give to me so that I could go and watch a movie that I'd missed in his cabin, which I thought was a little bit, I don't know, a little bit forward, I guess, but I knew that it was with good intentions, because he wasn't sort of sleazy at all. And so I rang him to say, thank you very much for that, but I won't. But as soon as I heard his voice, I realised that there was something very wrong with him. And and he just said, look, I'm really sorry. I've got a really bad migraine, and the doctor's already been, and he'll probably be again soon. And he said, I'll just see you when I see you. And I felt really sorry, because I thought, here's this man by himself. And so I used the key and I went upstairs, and I met his cabin attendant, who was just walking down with a bucket of ice. And he just sort of said, Mister's very sick. So I went in, and when I saw him, I was horrified. I'd never seen anyone with a severe migraine that, you can't even lift your head up. And so for the next few hours, until the doctor came back to give him another injection, and then the doctor said, if this doesn't work in 2 or 3 hours, we'll have to take him down to the hospital, which they did. And so I ended up going down with them and staying with him. And then by that night, he was able to come back to his room, and so I went with him again and virtually spent the next 24 hours with him. Nothing happened, of course, but we just got to know each other a lot more intimately as far as conversation went. And he would ask me things like about my life, and there was so many things that I wasn't allowed to do that he found very surprising. And so I guess there was I'll just give you an example. He told me how much he'd enjoyed becoming an Australian citizen when he turned 50. And um, and I said to him, I've always wanted to do that. And he said, well, why haven't you? And I said, well, I'm not allowed to. And he said, well, what do you mean you're not allowed to? And I said, well, there's a lot of things I'm not allowed to do. I said, I'm not allowed to have a microwave, and I'm not allowed to read. I'm not allowed. There was just a whole list of things. And so it just made me realise, as he'd ask me these questions and he'd sort of coax answers out of me, and he just sort of made me look at my life a lot differently. I didn't realise how controlled my life was, because I'd just become used to it. And honestly, if I hadn't have met him, I probably would still be there. But we just got to be friends, I guess really friends. And then we started to seek each other out. And I still had the key, and we'd leave notes in his cabin of where we would be. And so we would all be together as a group at night with the girls, and he'd be our dance partner. And we had lots of fun. We all went to bingo together, and he would still go on shore excursions. But we still found time just to sort of sit and get to know each other better. And I just found it really warm and comforting, and it was really nice. And even though nothing physical happened until right at the very end of the cruise, and that was instigated by me, because I, you know, before the cruise, people would joke and say, oh, you're going on the cruise, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, to have a bit of fun. And I thought, if you only knew that every night of my life I have been dragged across a bed, 2 weeks without that would seem like heaven. And so I instigated that. And when we left the cruise, there was no thought about, catching up, or I had said to him, if I never see you again, these 2 weeks will see me through the rest of my life. That's how much it's meant to me, on how you've made me feel. And we said that in 6 months' time, we swapped phone numbers. We said, in 6 months' time, one of us will reach out. And if we still feel the same way, let's make somewhere that we catch up. And it was really hard leaving each other, even at the airport. He stayed with me until my flight left, and I was very tearful on the way home. And when I saw my husband there to pick me up, I just felt, I was angry. I felt angry. I felt resentful. I thought, how dare you treat me like this for my whole life? It's so imbalanced. It's so I've never was an equal. I never got a decision. I never got a say. And yet I had to be the one who did everything. But that also meant I took the blame for everything that didn't go right. And I just always thought that our life would have gotten better, once we were better off financially. And by the time I was 46, we were the best that we'd ever been, financially. We had a holiday home, he used to do racing, and so every weekend we were at the holiday house. But for me, it was just always work. I had to prepare everything when we got there, do the meals, pack up everything, washing when we got home, get everything ready for the next week. And my life was just work. It was just hard work. And so 3 days afterwards, I was sitting at a bus stop. I'd gone to work, and I'd gone to work the next day. We came home on a Monday, and on Tuesday, I ended up ringing him, and I said to him, and he was happy to hear from me. He was thankfully he was single, and lived alone. But he said, "I'm so happy that you rang." He said, I've been thinking about you all the time," and he said, "I feel much better." And once I felt the same way that he did, it made me think, I'm going to do something about this. Mind you, I didn't tell him. But on the third day, I was sitting outside the bus stop, um, near where I worked, and I wrote 5 letters. I wrote one to my son, to my daughter, to my husband, to my mum and dad, and to my boss. And I wrote those letters out, and I thought, if I don't get a sign by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, any sign at all, because I'm a big believer in signs, that this isn't the right decision, I won't go, and I won't ever think about him again. And I didn't get a sign. I didn't get any, there was no, it was like silence. And the 8 o'clock the next morning, I packed an overnight bag. I used my company car. I drove to the airport. I booked a flight over the phone on the way. which, mind you, this is the year 2000. It was $510 one way just to go from Melbourne to Queensland. A 2-hour flight, yes. So it was a long flight. I mean, it was a lot of money. But anyway, I put it on my credit card, and I left my company car at the airport parking with the keys in it. I phoned my boss and I said to her, "I'm sorry to do this to you, but I'm leaving as of today. My phone's in the car park at the airport, and I won't be coming back." And she was shocked, very shocked. And well, I mean, what can you say? You can't say anything to that. And then I got into the terminal and I rang David, and he was happy to hear from me. And I said to him, "I'm at the airport. I'm about to hop on a plane and I'll be there at 11:30." And I mean, he was an hour away from the airport, but all he said was, "I'll be there." And when I saw him, now mind you, I met this lady. Now, this is funny too. I met this lady, I sat next to this lady on the flight, and she said, "It's funny how you meet people and like total strangers." And she said to me, "Oh, are you off on holiday or you're going home?" And I said, "I've just run away from home." And she said, "What?" And I said, "Yes, I've just run away from home." And she said, "Oh, okay, seatbelts on. Let's get a drink and get started." And so for the next 2 hours, I told her all of this, that I'd been on the cruise and what I'd done. And even though we never exchanged numbers, I just feel like she was an angel sent to me to make me feel like I was on the right path. And it wasn't until it was lovely seeing David at the airport, and he was completely okay with me being there, no questions asked. And mind you, his mother and sister lived in a house on the property as well. And I hadn't thought about any of that. All I'd thought of was, I want that feeling back again. And then it wasn't until we got inside the house, he had to go back to work, and I just collapsed and thought, oh my God, what have I done? And I thought, it's too late to go back. I wouldn't even make it before they finished work. What are the kids going to say? And then I was just a blubbering mess, I think, for the next couple of days. But I just, yeah, I felt like I'd been a coward. There was no way known. If I had have said to my husband, "Oh, by the way, I've met someone else, and I'm just going to go to Queensland now to live," I would have been buried in the veggie patch by the weekend. There is no way known I would have gotten out of there in one piece. So it was the only way that I could have. But I realised, how the enormity of what I'd done, like just to walk out of 28 years of memories and photo albums and children and all your little bits and pieces that seem to be very important to you, which all of a sudden really aren't important. And yeah, so I did that. But mind you, 3 days later, they found out where I was, and they sent my daughter up. And yeah, what I ended up going back for 8 days, and then I ran away again for another 8 days, and then I came back for 3 weeks, and then this went on back and forth. We went to counsellors, we went to the family priest. We did all of these things for my husband to try and repair things, which was too little too late. And my heart has gone, my heart was gone. I wasn't, I felt nothing. I just felt nothing. I just wanted to be with David. And in the end, yes, he did attack me, and I had to go into a woman's refuge. And then the campaign totally started on him trying to ruin our lives. And that went, and not only our lives, all of my family had revenge a lot of deeds that were, I look back now and think, my goodness, how did we ever get through that? David was sent a bullet and said, the gun will be next. And we had to go to the police. There was flyers, horrible flyers sent to everyone in my address book. And the campaign that followed for the next few years was horrific. But 8 months from meeting David was when I moved to Queensland for good. And yeah, we've been very happy ever since.
I have a
But I'm
question.
still not safe.
Before you ask your question, Scott, and keep it in your brain if you can, please. I don't know, when you were telling your story, Scott and I think we could not stop, like, just being elated in your space of being free or
Here's a
feeling.
quick pause in the conversation to invite you to join our Facebook community, Soulmates and Suitcases podcast. Tell your story, amplify your voice, where we share upcoming guests, new episodes, and conversations from the podcast. And you can catch all episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to the show.
Or feeling free. And I just wanted to say that before Scott asks this question.
Well, it actually kind of reminded me a little bit of us.
I know.
Ah.
However, how were your kids in all of this? Like, where were they in the story? And I know you might not want to talk about them, and if you don't, that's good. It's just a question.
No, that's absolutely fine. My son was 26, and at 24, he bought his own home and he had a fiance. And he was living with her, but he worked with his father. So I saw him every day. And his father was a real control freak, and my son could never do the right thing. He was always getting into trouble as well. And my daughter was 20 and had just started going out with what he looked like a bad boy, but he was a lovely, lovely boy. And my husband, of course, didn't approve and was trying very much to break them up, which he didn't. And they've been together now for 27 years, very happily married.
Nice.
And my son ended up finishing with the fiance and ended up he's happy now. He's been married before and ended and that. But I think the relationship we had with the three of us, because we always had to keep each other's back. We were like the three musketeers. If one got into trouble, everybody else helped helped out so that we wouldn't get into too much trouble. And we still have that same relationship today. That's never changed. The kids have always, they were the ones in the end after 8 months have said, Mum, just go and be happy. Just go and be happy. Even though it was 17 years before it was safe enough for me to move back into the same state. I still travelled. They would send me for Christmas, I would get a flight. For Mother's Day, I would get a flight. Wherever I was, they always had to make sure they knew where their father was, and one of them would pick me up from the airport. And even though people found out or knew, no one ever, no one ever dobbed me in. I was, I always was nervous, but I was never found out until 17 years when he actually thought that it was a good idea that I came back to help out with grandchildren. And we had seen him a few times, and it was okay, but I still got that nervousness in my stomach. It was just to see him. So it got to the stage that I said to the kids, I can't be anywhere near him because it sets me off. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, believe it or not, from that. And even if I think about, like, I got triggered a couple of years ago, I think I had a nervous breakdown and I was triggered. And so it comes like a hot flush and I just break out in a sweat. And that's the effects that it can have on you. And I sort of think, how many women are there out there that are in that same situation that you just think, hopefully one day it'll get better? Or maybe one day I'll be a widow and I'll be able to have some freedom in my life. And that's really sad. But
Yeah.
I think people are more aware these days of what abuse is and the types of abuse, what coercive control is, um, and controlling behaviour, and what a narcissist is. Because you can't, with a narcissist, the last thing they want is to be called out or embarrassed, and they will get their revenge one way or another, as we found out many times. When I was living for 6 months down in Melbourne after events had happened, and I thought I'll make this right with the kids and make this right with the family. And of course, he found out where I lived, and he would come in and he'd turn the power off, and he'd leave nasty things in the house, and so I wasn't safe. And David wasn't safe either. We had to probably one of the first stalking cases in Brisbane back in 2000. And he was charged with stalking, but it didn't matter the amount of times we went to the police. No one could do anything. Oh, what are they going to do? You walk in there with all your evidence and they say, yeah, okay, well, we'll go around and warn him. And nothing was ever done. He just got off scot-free.
And so what is
So,
your relationship with him now?
oh, well, we don't see each other. He knows that I'm living in the state, and I mean, it wouldn't take him much, even though we're silent electors. It wouldn't take him too much to find out where I am, but I don't think that he would. Well, I don't know. He's wiped the kids that many times. He'll wipe them and not speak to them for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden turn up as though nothing's gone wrong. So at the moment, he's wiped my son and both the grandchildren, and so he doesn't. He only thinks of the world according to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, but again, if he found out that I put all of this out in public,
Mm-hmm.
um, I would feel very exposed, and I would really have to be very, very careful, because he wouldn't. Consequences don't. There's no consequences for him. He doesn't think of, oh, if I did something to her, I might end up in jail. He would only think, I have to make sure I don't get caught. That's that would be it. I mean, we had the holiday house, and out of the divorce settlement, the judge had said, you have to take something. You worked for 28 years, like you've contributed to this. So I was given my car, which was a reasonably new car, $20,000, and the holiday house. Now, I never got the car. I never got the money. And he cancelled the insurance on the holiday house and then took to it with a sledgehammer. And there wasn't a window, a cupboard, a bit of floor. There was nothing left. It was on stilts, and he even took a chainsaw and all of the stilts he cut through halfway, so that a breath of wind would have toppled the whole house over. Thankfully, I'd thought that he might do that, and I insured it in my name. And even though I didn't get a lot of money, I was able to get a small unit in Brisbane. But even when it was on the market and it had been repaired, every weekend he would go up there and take out the for sale sign and throw it in the agent's office. And it was just a lot of nasty, nasty, scary stuff. Yeah, it was horrible. Sorry, I feel like I've gone off track there.
No,
No,
it's
not at
so
all.
it's so important for our listeners to grasp the understanding, because I believe, like you said, Simone, I think there's lots of other women and situations out there where we hope there'll be a change. We hope they'll hit their bottom, or we hope, having a baby might help, or something to this effect, and it doesn't. And you continue to go on, and you kind of go to this place of everything's okay. Like you had mentioned, you didn't physically get hurt, but the psychological and mental bombardment and just it's just that to me is like almost DNA changing. And so when I think of that, I think of, you talked about your two kids and there's grandkids. So if someone else sees themselves in this sort of a situation, do you recommend, like we need some family therapy here, like, because these things can trickle down as well into sort of the generations.
Well, yes, absolutely, except they have to be willing to
Yeah.
recognize themselves and see that there should be something changed. Nowadays, I would recommend to women to have a plan to leave, because you can only leave and go a long way away, but you're going to need money for that. And you have to realize that then you will have to cut ties with all of your family, all of your friends. And so it's a matter of, people say, oh, well, why didn't you just leave? Well, where would I go? And how would I support two kids in another state and put them through school and get a job and put a roof over their head? How could I be so selfish to take them away from all their toys and all their family just for my own selfish needs? And so that's why you stay. But then once the kids are old enough, even then it's hard, because they're starting to live their life and they've still got a broken home, even in their 20s. There isn't an easy, there's no easy answer. But the thing is, I sort of think that even even in your late 40s, you can still change your life. And sometimes you have to do it drastically and just run away. But yeah, it's hard. I know that there's lots of women like me, who are in situations with controlling husbands, and they don't have an option. They don't have an out. They're either held there by children or finances, or, because you have to realize you're not going to get anything. You are on your own, or you face consequences. And here we have one woman a week who's killed by a partner or ex-partner, and that's a lot of women. And you think, what if that was a teacher or a doctor or a politician or any other thing? But it just seems that, oh, yeah, well, there's another woman, and and I think that was 2 years ago here, there was a lot of focus on femicide, and it just started to make me realize, I think that's why I had a nervous breakdown, is I thought that could have been me. That could have been me. It still could be me. But I sort of think that it seems to be too hard a problem. There doesn't
Mm.
seem to be an easy answer of how do we stop these women getting killed, or how do we, and like last year, just in the streets up near where we lived in northeast Victoria, a woman jumped in to help someone who was getting beaten up, and she was killed for helping. So it's a massive, massive problem, but there's no easy fix.
No, and I think
No.
that's life. There's no easy fix. And I do
Well,
want to acknowledge just one thing as well, is that when you made that decision, and this is a big thing, when you made that decision to go on that cruise and technically not listen to what your husband was expecting or your previous husband was expecting, I think that was the pivotal point that I see where things started to shift for you. And so making those decisions all the time, and sometimes they're very scary decisions, even publishing your book and putting your story out there, it allows for different things to then come into your life when we do these scary things.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And if I think, I quite often I think to myself, oh, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe that I just packed a bag and ran away. And people, and I felt, like I said, I felt that it was a very cowardly thing to do. But other people have said, no, it's very courageous that you just did that. And I think it's really good that I did, because I've had more than 25 years of, David and I are very rarely apart, for more than a couple of hours. And we still have the most incredibly loving relationship that we had, that started, I guess, on that cruise, which I think we were put, fate, I think, put us both in that space at that time so that we could meet, because we would never have met. But what I've found is that instead of having someone who's opposite, we like all the same things. We like the same food, the same music. We have the same characteristics. We have the same morals. We are so alike. He's like a female version of me, and vice versa. But we just fit together so well that I'm glad. I'm really, really glad that I made that leap, because it's turned out really well. And now we're in our
You know,
70s.
the the courage of living in that environment for that many years, and then the amazing courage that it took to break free, and it just astounds me. And I have my mother and my first wife was a narcissist, and I went for therapy when I was with my previous wife, and the therapist goes, your wife's a narcissist, and we will never get her in here for therapy. And
Wow.
that's the truth with narcissists, because they never do anything wrong. And it's it's sad, but it still goes on today. Like, I'm not going to say who, but I have somebody in my life that's going through a divorce that I believe the wife's getting punished just kind of like how you were. And she was henpecked down and down and down to where she lost any self-respect she had of herself. And it's sad that it still happens. And however, though, it's not just women that put up with that. Men get the same treatment. And like, I'm sure if I hadn't have, even in my marriage, if I hadn't have been through my mom, I probably would have continued putting it up with my wife. And finally, it was just enough. I can't take it. And it was scary, because who knows what's going to happen? Am I going to lose everything that I've worked for again? Am I going to, and that cycle? And then it's really funny. It's like Lisa and I met at this 7-day retreat, and we both thought it went one more day. And so I said, I thought this went till Sunday. And she went, so did I. And I said, so I guess we're going out for a burger or dinner tonight. And that's how our relationship started. We had gotten to know each other a little bit through the thing, and nothing, kind of like how you were talking with your husband now. And we've been married for 4 years this year, and it's absolutely amazing. And you talking about it gives me great hope that in 26 years, it's still going to be just as amazing.
We know it is.
It certainly can be.
Yes. And
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the thing too, is, and yes, it is right with men. My son went through a 4-year, well, actually his wife was a narcissist. They were married for 10 years. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because his father was like that, that he gravitated towards that type of personality. He had another relationship that went for 4 years that absolutely put him through the ringer, and we could see it, but we couldn't do anything about it.
Mhm.
Thankfully, he walked away. Well, she made sure that she had, they called, she was well, I forget, there's a word for it, and she ended up going on to someone else who she realized would be able to offer her more than what he was. And so thankfully she left him, and he was absolutely broken over it. But he now realizes that that was that type of personality that he needs to stay away from, because she was so much like his father. And so yes, the men absolutely go through the same thing, but you can't intervene. That's the
No.
thing. I know women now who are in that situation and they are trapped, and there is nothing that I can do to help them except be there to listen. I can't advise, because I wouldn't advise anybody to do what I did, because it might not end up that way. But it's very hard. But it's good. I think education is the main thing with girls. And the other thing I think is important, which I would love to campaign for, is that girls learn self-defense from about 9 years on. So if in 10 years' time, when they're in their late teens, they can defend themselves, they won't as easily become a victim, because the thing with us is we are overpowered so easily that we have to be very careful, because otherwise things will get violent. And we can't defend ourselves unless we have a weapon, which you can't really do that. Although I slept with a weapon for many years. I still have a weapon next to my bed now in case, which is really ridiculous. But we can't defend ourselves because we're weaker physically. And I think there's a lot of girls, they become controlled because they can't defend themselves. So I wish there was more education for girls on being able to defend themselves, that they won't become a victim as easily as they are
You
now.
know, I almost wish a little bit different. I almost wish there was in schools more about mental health and more about what life should look like, more about what finances should look like, instead of all this stuff that's really not important, because a lot of people end up in trades. So why are they forced to do science and math? And I understand some trades take that. However, it's like, why don't we teach people what's really important?
Like
One about
resilience.
resilience, conflict resolution. Uh, like in Canada here, and I'm not even sure if they have it anymore, but when I was a kid, they had sex ed, but they never talked about the
Yes.
relationship. They just talked about sex ed. And it's like, it just, it baffles me today, now that I'm older, that we don't teach people how to be productive and how to be successful in life.
And self-confidence and
100%.
self-esteem and respect,
Self-worth.
and yeah, I think education would help in a lot of ways like that. I mean, I think while social media is good in some ways, it's also really bad in other ways, because a lot of boys get influenced by the wrong people, and it just starts the cycle again.
Yeah.
So yes, but I always, what I'm glad about is that even though I was in my late 40s, that I did change my life. And I sort of think that maybe other women, maybe could take something from that and think, well, my life isn't over. I don't just have to sit here and wait for him to die, because I can still have a life. And as long as you're like, I changed my career, I ended up going into real estate, which I loved, and became quite good at that. And so as long as you can still work, and as long as you're still breathing, I think there's always hope. There's always hope. There's always a way that you can change your life.
Yeah, and when you can see your own self-worth, so just to imagine that world of everyone seeing their own self-worth, like that is the
Yes.
world we hope for. That confidence, you have the confidence, and yeah, well, there'll always be challenges in
Final
life.
pause. If you've got a message on your heart and want to be our guest, don't be shy. We'd love to hear from you. Visit forwardwalkingchoices.com, scroll to the Soulmates and Suitcases podcast section, and click apply here. Now back to the show.
In life. And it is about building resilience, building your confidence. And so when people read your book, Simone, what will they find in your book? Because, of course, the title is We Met on a Cruise. So do you talk about your previous relationship, or is it from that point forward?
No, I talk about my previous relationship, what my life looked like, and about the cruise and the 2 weeks of the cruise. And then I talk about what it was like when I came back, and then the aftermath of that. And then it really ends when I actually go to Queensland for the last time, which is about 8 months afterwards. So it's virtually a snapshot of those 8 months of what happened before, during, and after the cruise. And yeah, those months of the events that happened, and then afterwards. But it sort of stops where I go to Queensland for the last time, and it doesn't go on much further than that, except I think I say something at the end of the book about of how we're still together after all these years, which is lovely because it just makes you realise that your life isn't over when you're
Exactly.
halfway through. Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
and we've had lots of challenges since then, with health issues and family issues and all sorts of normal dramas that everybody goes through. But what's never changed is our actual relationship of that nothing's ever like, my husband had cancer, and I've had a couple of scares, and we've had operations and problems, and he still has a terrible migraine headache problem. But nothing changes the actual relationship because we are equal. He's better at some things, I'm better at some things, but we're totally equal, and we like all the same things. So there's not really a lot to argue about. So I think, being equal is the most important thing. And what I find most important is being able to speak freely. And that's the whole thing, is if you can speak freely and not be judged or criticised, then I think that's the most important thing, being able to speak freely. Yeah, which I
100%.
could never do before. I said
100%.
everything under my breath before.
Yes, as I like to reference that. So when I met Scott, I said, nothing anymore is going to be swept under the rug. And so that's the concept that you're talking about, Simone, being able to share what you need to share, being heard, which is important. So maybe one or two final words, maybe to someone who's out there listening, man or woman, who finds themselves in a situation where I like to say they may be feeling like their nervous system can't take any more, or their brain or their heart or whatever it is. What sort of message would you like to share with them, and then tell us where they can get your book?
I think what I would is never lose hope. I think never lose hope that either you can change your situation or your situation can change. Never feel defeated. Always look to ways that you can make your life better, even if it's only very small ways. It doesn't have to be big, dramatic ways, but educate yourself and never give up hope. Never give up hope. Yeah. And I think I've tended to give away more books than I've actually sold because I'm not very good at that side of things. I mean, I've done a lot of library talks and that sort of thing, but um, I know you can get it on Amazon. Um, you can get it through my website, which I don't know that I'm going to keep going because it doesn't really do much. And I have an Instagram page, but I don't really put anything on it. So I'm not very good at marketing. And I sort of think that if it's meant to be, it'll end up in someone's hands. However it is that they but I know you can get it on Amazon, but I don't know that any copies have been sold. But everyone that has read it has just said, oh my God, I couldn't put it down. It's not a real, it's like, it's not, it's not a thick book, and most people read it in a weekend because they can't put it down. So I guess that's good advertising. I'm just not very good at marketing.
It's like you said, who it's meant to reach, it'll reach those people. So we'd like to,
Absolutely.
yeah, exactly. We'd like to thank you, Simone, for sharing your story. It is very inspirational. And to our audience and listeners today, if you enjoyed Simone's story and are excited maybe to get her book, please leave a comment under our show and or a review as well, and share this show, because you never know who might need support where it looks good, the relationship from the outside, and things aren't going well. So please share this show, and for those of you who would like to reach out to Scott and I, we do have books as well, similar to Simone, telling our whole story. And or if you would like to be a guest on our show, you can reach out to us at forwardwalkingchoices.com. Thanks again, Simone. We appreciate your time. And from Thailand here, I'll say Kapun Ka. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And one other
Lovely to
thing,
speak with you.
Thank you, Simone.
if people know that somebody is kind of like in Simone's situation, why don't you buy them Simone's book?
Yes.
Well, the thing is, that's a good idea, because all of this happens behind closed doors. And we sat in church every Sunday looking like the perfect family, but as soon as we got home, behind those closed doors, our life was very different. So you won't always see what's going on, but you might know what's going on. So yes, definitely pass it along.
Listen to your intuition. Thanks again, Simone. We
Hey, thanks,
appreciate it.
Simone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Thanks, Simone.
Bye-bye.
Been great.
Bye-bye.
Looking for more inspiration around healing, love, growth, and possibility? You can explore our books at payhip.com/Lisa Scott Brearley Authors. And if today's episode meant something to you, we'd love for you to follow the podcast, share it with someone you care about, or join our Soulmates and Suitcases community online. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.